Welcome to MAFS Madness on So Many Receipts. I'm Fleur Michelle.
And I'm Shelley Seddon. We're journalists, reality show addicts, and obsessed with Married at First Sight.
Bringing you all the tea from MAFS 2026. Let's get stuck in. Hey guys, Fleur here. Shelley is still away, but I'm still here holding down the MAFS fort until the bitter end. And I do mean bitter. I mean, how much more animosity can we take from these people? So firstly, final vows, Beck and Danny. Yeah, I think we all predicted Danny would run for the hills as soon as he finished telling Beck she was his soulmate, but only as a soulmate friend. Ouch. But David dumping Alissa before she could dump him, her face, pure gold. I kind of didn't see that coming, but justice for David, because by the end, Alissa was annoying AF, right? However, here's the wild part. An entire year before filming, David basically predicted the relationship wouldn't work. So I found an old video of his from 2024, which I talked about in the very first week. He actually has taken it down now, but don't worry because I still have it. And watching it back now, it's crazy. It's like he prophesized every single step in the entire sequence of their relationship. I'll play you bits of it now. It's so accurate. It's kind of spooky. He's the Nostradamus of MAFS. Talk about a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Okay, so I'm no expert on dating, but I can only share my own personal experience on dating.
So David thought Alissa looked like the perfect bride, but even then in a Voxy mentioned 2 red flags. The get down on one knee felt controlling and he hated her swearing.
I feel like a lot of the times, we meet someone and we create a false persona or we romanticize them into being this person that actually doesn't exist. Like we meet someone, they show us a bunch of red flags and we ignore those red flags because in our minds, we've already created this persona of them that's perfect.
Still, he brushed it off, telling himself she was just bubbly and strong-minded. But halfway through the experiment, things shifted. She said he didn't match her energy and started to run the relationship.
So essentially, you start dating someone, you ignore all the red flags, you get serious with them, and then halfway through the relationship, you realize that the red flags you were ignoring were actually who they really were.
At the retreat, she swears at him over some bedroom curtains and questions whether he has enough assets for her. His warning bells are going off, but he stays quiet because he doesn't want to lose her.
So now you start to realize that you messed up.
At the grass is greener, he sees it more clearly. Alissa mocks him and flirts with her backup groom. That's the turning point. But he still tries to win her back at the final dinner party, even after she ridiculously blew up about him taking off his ring. However, it finally clicks. This is who Alissa is. He finds his voice and walks away first.
Don't make things complicated. Just take people who they are, and the right person, I'm sure, will come along that displays all the qualities that you really want in a dating, in the dating scene or in the person you're looking to date.
I did like how he finished the video saying, you have to trust that the right person will come along. I'm really hoping that final part of David's prophecy comes true for him. Now, Gia finally made it to the Stan couch for the MAFS after party, and OMG, talk about car crash TV. All 3 hosts basically called her a liar, to Danny's delight. I'll explain in a sec. So Gia claimed she never spoke to backup groom James after the grass is greener, but she did. And James, who was also a guest on Stam, came with receipts. It showed that just an hour after her street fight with Scott, Gia was calling James for sympathy and even sending him bikini pics. What? When Scott found out, he was furious. Gia denied everything until her messages were shown on the couch and the hosts called her out as she struggled to explain. After the clip was posted to social media by my friend Tom B. Rich, Danny jumped into the comments and said, "Do you believe me now?" with 5 laughing face emojis. He's been calling Gia a liar all season about "Am I your type?" and clearly feels vindicated. Thousands of people liked his comment, but plenty still weren't convinced, saying, nah, still don't believe you, Danny. I'm not sure I believe him either. And by the way, go and check out Tom's MAFS content on his socials because he is hilarious. Now, Gia also told the Stan hosts that Scott had said nasty things to her behind the scenes, including calling her fat, criticizing her hair and telling her to stay away from Beck, which Gia felt was controlling of him. I did think it was weird that Beck was basically playing director at that dinner party, instructing Gia on what to say to Scott. But then Stan played unseen footage of Beck admitting it was all just a setup. She wanted that dinner party to go as badly as possible for Gia for payback. Gia broke down when they played that clip, but this just shows that Scott was actually looking out for Gia. She said he was being controlling, but he actually just wanted to protect her. Girl, what were you thinking? I'm actually surprised Gia agreed to go on Stan after all this time. I knew that they would roast her, and it was a train wreck. And yeah, she did front up to face the music, but it was very off key. Still on Gia, and it now seems Chris is backpedaling after his bizarre Stan appearance, where he basically gave Gia the cold shoulder and seemed to be distancing himself from their friendship. According to sources, Gia was pretty hurt by what Chris said on the couch, especially as she'd put so much time into their friendship, taking endless calls from him throughout the experiment and afterwards. I think she had some choice words for him because in the days after that Stan appearance, Chris posted so many videos in a row to his pages with Gia in the comments saying, I love you, etc. And he responded with the same profuse devotion to her. And in the lead up to this Stan appearance, he had actually pulled back on responding to her comments. So it just seemed like a total backpedal to me. There was also a new clip of them back on the farm, lip syncing together. And honestly, it was so filtered that Chris looked like a cartoon. He looked like something out of a Pixar movie. Someone commented, hang on, I thought on the Stan couch you indicated you weren't close friends anymore. And he said, oh, look, they just cut a lot out of that conversation. Okay, but what he said about her to the hosts still didn't sound great. Sorry, bestie. We also have some exclusive tea here about the guy Chris dumped to go on the show. So Chris contacted this ex known as Will after he finished MAFS to apologise for ghosting him to go on the series, but then asked Will if he would mind terribly much if he did staged pap shots with him and Gia to basically pretend that he moved on with another guy for PR. So I spoke to a friend of Will's, and Chris's long-term ex, Jason Smith, also spoke out to media, but Will was the guy Chris dated right before the show. So although Will was ridiculously upset, he agreed to meet Chris after filming. But when Chris suggested the staged photos, Will refused, calling it the final hurtful straw. Good on him after all Chris put him through. So get this, they'd only been dating for a month when one night Chris stepped away for a mysterious hour-long phone call, now thought to be MAFS confirming his casting. The following week, Chris disappeared. He stopped answering Will's calls, leaving him to worry if Chris had been in an accident. No goodbye conversation. WTF. Look, I know it's an uncomfortable chat. I really like you, but I'd rather go on a TV show and maybe meet someone else. But still, just 10 days later, Will saw an article about Chris marrying Sam and realised he'd been blocked. After filming, Chris unblocked him and claimed he felt obligated to do the show and couldn't tell anyone. Look, it is messy when someone starts dating right before they get cast. And in Chris's case, even more complicated given everything else going on in his life. So maybe he just should have said no. Was all of this worth it? Will also says he and Chris caught feelings for each other, but Chris chose fame over their growing relationship. Chris later told Will that he kept thinking about him during the experiment and had desperately wanted to reach out to him while he was filming with Sam, particularly during that disastrous homestay. A friend of Will's has now told me Chris later apologized to Will and was sincere, but when it came up again, he became defensive. And you know what? It's pretty clear that Chris doesn't like saying sorry or probably doesn't like facing issues either. Will had no idea Chris had even applied for MAFS months earlier, while apparently still with his long-term ex, Jason Smith. Will was shocked, given Chris had talked about wanting a quiet farm life, raising kids, and he never mentioned an interest in reality TV drama. Chris told Will about the pregnancies, and like Sam, he was genuinely happy for him, but he also didn't know Chris was on a recent break from Jason or that they had a pattern of reconnecting. Despite everything, Will says Chris is charismatic, he's capable of being very caring, and while he was furious at first and doesn't want to reconcile, he now holds no ill feelings. He just hopes that Chris self-reflects and gets help for the issues that seem to follow him. Okay, that's all the MAFS madness I have for you guys today. Catch you next time.